We cannot turn our back on them, and we should not turn our back on them. And I'm committed to working as aggressively as we possibly can with SIPC to take the most expansive possible view of how to repay these claims, and to do it in as quick a fashion as they possibly can. But I agree that we need to push very hard to make people whole to the greatest extent possible.
First question. Are either of you aware of any instance in which SIPC has defined net equity the way the trustee is doing in this case? Ms. Coffey and then Ms. Freeman.
Do you want to go first?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I can assure this committee that there has never been a case in a SIPA liquidation where SIPC or the SEC has taken the position that SIPC does not have to comply with the law. This is the first time in SIPC's history that SIPC has taken the position that net equity as defined by Congress does not apply to SIPC.
First Coffey.
As I understand it, brokers, investment advisors are required to put into the fund to be covered by SIPC $150.
That is not correct. Currently, the assessments by our bylaw require each brokerage firm to be assessed 1/4% of their net operating revenues. When we started paying Madoff claims, we instituted, effective April 1st, assessments based on revenues rather than
Beginning
a flat
when?
fee. April 1st.
Before that, it was $150?
When we reached $1 billion, which our risk managers...
Yeah, but before Madoff, it was $150?
When we reached the figure of 100...
I don't have a lot of time left, so if we could just focus on a couple of more questions.
The answer was based on revenues until 1990, when we reached $1 billion. Then from 1990 through April of this year, it was a flat fee.
Of?
$150.
Mr. Chapman, you said, just to get into the weeds on one little, not a little point, but one point in some of the material you supplied us with, you said that the trustee, correct me if I'm wrong, the trustee and SIPC are running administrative expenses of approximately $100 million per year. But Mr. Harbeck says in his testimony that the trustees have only paid $1.2 million so far. Can you
I think I can
clarify that? Yeah.
Yes, the trustees' legal fees are...
Hit your little button.
I'm sorry. The trustees' legal fees have been approved for the first 15 weeks at the rate of $1 million a week. He then filed an application for another 23 weeks, and he's running again at $1 million a week. So if you project that for a year, it would be $50 million a year. And Mr. Harbeck has said publicly that the non-legal fees, the forensic accountants, et cetera, who are going back through generations to figure out the net investment, which of course is not required by the statute, Mr. Harbeck had said in the press that those expenses are running at the rate of $1 million a week.
Wow. So it's one of those cases, as is typical, and I see my time has come up already, cases where there's almost an incentive for, and I'm not saying that there is, I'm just saying on the face of it, there's an incentive for not things to move at an expedited basis because you have a pretty good fee there that's guaranteed to be paid for the period of time.
There's an inherent conflict of interest in the way the statute.
Which Madoff investors are eligible for their SIPC insurance?
Congressman, let me just say that this is it shouldn't be such a difficult issue, but it is, and of course it's a very heartbreaking issue, because the tragic truth is there is not enough money available to pay off all the customer claims. And as you point out, there are...
That leads, if I could just interject there, a larger problem, because that means that our citizens are not entitled to have confidence in the system.
Ms. Chapman's written statement at page 17 says that the trustee in Madoff has already sued several elderly, virtually destitute investors. Ms. Chapman is a vigorous advocate, but she's factually incorrect. The Madoff trustee has used the avoiding powers granted to him by SIPA and the Bankruptcy Code judiciously. He has not sued small investors.
My name is Adele Fox. I am a Bernard Madoff victim. Because I want to express everything I feel I prefer to read the statement I have prepared. I am a widow, 86 years old, worked all of my life. My husband was a teacher in the New York City school system. We lived frugally so that we could save for our retirement. Most unexpectedly, he died in 1986 because for many years he was exposed to asbestos in the walls of his classroom. After his death, I moved to Florida. A few months ago, I was subpoenaed to submit my records. Unfortunately, I only had records going back to 1999, and therefore could not prove how much I put in. And Mr. Pickard knows this. I have doubts as to how he determined what my initial investments were and the accuracy of his records. This past November, Irving Pickard sent 2 letters. These are the letters. I am so distressed that I cannot sleep, and my health is deteriorating. I have just been diagnosed with bleeding ulcers and irritable bowel syndrome. I am an emotional wreck and do not believe I can cope with this torture much longer. I have done nothing wrong. How can this happen in this country? How can Mr. Pickard be allowed to persecute innocent elderly people who are struggling terribly with declining health and now a very serious financial situation? At the December 9th Congressional hearing, Mr. Harbeck stated that he would not go after people like me. Obviously not so in my case, and how many other cases.
To me, Professor Coffey, that one of the problems here is there's a certain amount of money, and we're sort of backing our coverage into that amount of money, as opposed to creating.
It's underfunded. You're quite right.
Right. The law is the law, and if it happens to be underfunded, then there ought to be an assessment or some way of making the people whole. Not say, well, it's not $500,000 because we don't have enough cash in the bank to make this thing whole. And again, I just go back to how important it is, how strategic and essential it is for the public to know that if they invest, that the money, there is a fund there to protect them if there's fraud, insolvency, and those things out there.
I think you're quite right. I want to make one little comment.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. Let me just make one final statement, if I will, because I may not be able to be here for the second panel of witnesses. I have real concerns about a trustee being able to receive $1 million a week in legal fees. To me, it's an encouragement for him to keep litigation going, to go after. Now, whether it is or not, let's assume he's acting totally honorably. But the fact is, it does put an appearance of evil, if you will, an appearance of a conflict of interest there to pay someone for the more energetic he is in going after one class of victims.
I want to repeat myself on the comments that I made earlier, that we're obviously not looking necessarily for fairness, because I don't know that you can get fairness, but what we're looking for with the folks here is justice and reliance that they made, not on independent investment decisions that they were making in the normal course of things, but on their reliance on what the government assured them through both through this program after the fact and through the assurances that these being registered and the fund, his fund coming under the SEC as well. Thank you.
Gentlelady from California.
This is a shell game that you're playing with investors who have, I mean, this is over the heads of most of the people on our committee, I would think, how this happened and that this is being done. People relied on you, and they were let down, and we have to all collectively figure out a way to make all of them as whole as we can make them.
I guess what I'm getting to is, did you hear the outrage of the panel that we had earlier this morning?
Mr. Chairman, I hear it every day.
Okay. Well, I have to believe that outrage was sincere and somewhat based on, but I think what I'm particularly disturbed about this whole last 15, 18-month disaster that we've been in is an attitude at the governmental level or quasi-governmental level that it's not our problem. We don't have to take preventative steps, investigative steps. And I think you do. It is our problem. It's the committee's problem. It's the Congress's problem. It's the president's problem. You know, we just, as a matter of course, cannot accept in this country that some people feel that their government left them down, wrongly so.